everyone, and welcome to another episode on Ask the Expert in our small interview series organized by the Girl Powered Nutrition Advocacy Champions of the Sri Lanka Girl Guides Association. We hope to make conversations, important conversations on nutrition and health accessible to everyone. And today, here with us to dispel the common myths and misconceptions about nutrition and health, we have one of the key players in the nutrition community in Sri Lanka with us today, Professor Terrence Madhujith. Professor Terrence Madhujith is a professor of food science and technology, and he is also the director of the University Research Council at the University of Peradeniya, and also the council member of the Nutrition Society of Sri Lanka. So he is one of the eminent personalities involved in nutrition in Sri Lanka. And so, Professor, thank you so much for being with us today and taking time off your busy schedule. So it's a privilege to have you with us. So let's jump right into the interview, Professor. So nowadays, we're constantly being bombarded by all sorts of fake news and information coming at us from all sorts of different directions. There's multiple weight loss plans and diets, a miraculous cure for cancer. And it's very easy to get misled by all of this information coming at you from social media, mainstream media, people around us, etc. So this is why the GPN Orange stage focuses on learning about nutrition and information that we can rely on. And so we have with us today a list of frequently asked questions that most of us here have doubts about. And so, Professor, we hope that you can clear the doubts for us. And let us now move into our first question for the day. And I hope the screen is clear. Yes. Is coconut oil actually good or bad? So this is a question that I think a lot of us have. It's a constant debate. So, Professor, what do you say about this?
Thank you very much for inviting me for this important session, and it's very timely that you organize this. Once again, thank you very much. So it's a very valid question. People are talking whether coconut oil is good or bad. Well, I cannot say good or bad, but I will explain the scientific facts, and it's up to you to decide. In the world, there are two types of oils. We can basically categorize them as saturated oils and unsaturated oils. Now, through 70 years of research, it is been very well consolidated that saturated oils that we should limit in our daily intake. Okay, so the saturates should be limited to roughly about 20 grams per day. And for the coconut oil composition, if you look at it's 90 to 92% saturate. So therefore, being a saturated oil, we should have a limit. And there are other counter arguments as well. Although coconut oil is more or less nearly 90% saturated, it offers some medium chain fatty acids. However, despite the fact that it contains medium chain fatty acids, my view is that we should limit it. The rule is out of the total calorie requirement of a person, say an adult requires 2000 kilocalories per day, whatever that comes through fat should be limited to 30%. Okay, whether it's saturated or unsaturated, it should come under 30%. And according to the current World Health Organization guidelines, what is coming from saturates, as saturates should be limited to 10% of the daily calorie requirement. So when you translate into grams, it is less than 20 grams. So remember, we are taking some other saturates from milk, from dairy products, from nuts, from other sources, from eggs. We might take little saturates. So therefore, the rule is we should limit our saturate intake to maximum 10% of the total calorie requirement. So in terms of grams, it should be less than 20 grams per day. I think that suffices. So we cannot say whether coconut oil is good or bad. It has many plus points. It has negative points as well. So we should take this into account. So I would say, don't throw it out. Again, use it in moderation. So that's the key principle in nutrition. I hope that suffices.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor. That answered our question. Thank you for that comprehensive answer. And we will now move on to question 2. And this is a lot of questions. Even I have this question, and that is, vegetarians don't get enough protein because of meat not being included in their diet. So what's the opinion on that? And what food options would you suggest for them in view of a balanced diet?
Right. Again, a very valid question. Now, proteins, we have two main sources. One is plant-based proteins and animal-based proteins. Now, animal-based or animal source proteins, example, meat, poultry, egg, milk, and milk products. Now, these proteins, we call these proteins complete proteins because proteins provide amino acids. Now, when a protein is consumed, it is hydrolyzed or it is chopped up to amino acids. These amino acids are the ones that we absorb and utilize in the body. So the difference between plant proteins and animal proteins is there are differences. One thing is that generally animals do contain high amount of proteins. If you take meat or egg, for example, protein content is very high. Like if you take the egg, the total egg white is purely protein, except for water, everything else is protein. Egg yolk also contains a high amount of protein. And meat is basically made of muscles. So muscles are protein. So therefore, protein content is high. And the absorbability or the capacity of absorption is also high. When you take animal source proteins, nearly 90 to 100% of protein is absorbed in the gut. Whereas plant proteins, the protein content is generally low, except in pulses. Now, pulses like beans, mung bean, they contain high amount, but the rest of the vegetables and fruits, they are low in proteins. And also, the capacity to absorb or absorbability is also low. It varies from 70 to 90%. Okay. The other factor is that the animal proteins are called complete proteins because it provides all the amino acids in the right amount. You know, our body is made of muscles, and the animal muscles are also muscles. The structure is basically the same. Basic structure is the same. Basic composition is also the same, approximately. So therefore, our protein requirement can easily be met with these animal source proteins. However, plant proteins, on the other hand, they lack most of the time at least one amino acid. These are called limiting amino acid. Now, when at least one amino acid is missing, the body cannot do the function. There are 9 essential amino acids. These should essentially be taken from food, through food. So if you are a vegetarian, then you should be more careful in planning diet. This is, I cannot say this is not doable. This is doable, but you have to carefully formulate your diet. For example, if you take legumes, pulses, there are 2 amino acids missing, methionine and tryptophan. They don't contain much. If you, on the other hand, if you take cereals like wheat or rice, they again, they don't have adequate amount of lysine and isoleucine. So therefore, we have to make a match. Bring in both cereals and legumes, then you are safe. So you don't need to have these together in every meal, but within a day, if you consume both these groups, the amino acid requirement can be met. So therefore, as opposed to those who eat meat and milk and other drink milk and other animal source proteins. Vegetarians should pay a little more attention to the diet. As long as you do it, you're fine.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Professor. And I think that answered my long lasting question. And now we can move on to the next question. And that would be, are fresh vegetables actually more nutritious than frozen vegetables? And just to add on to that, where do organic vegetables factor into this?
Right. Now, vegetables, whether they are frozen or because freezing is one of the preservative methods that we use. It's kind of less common in Sri Lanka because in Sri Lanka the electricity is costly, so therefore many people don't go with this option. But in the Western world, in developed countries, is one of the very famous method to preserve vegetables. You name any vegetable can be preserved this way, except for few like beans, carrots, even cauliflower, this broccoli. Many vegetables can be frozen. So therefore, during freezing is a very guaranteed way of preserving quality, and the loss of nutrient is very minimal as opposed to many other preservative methods. So therefore, I wouldn't say that there's a significant difference. As long as it is properly frozen, it's perfectly fine. And the question that you posed again on organic, yeah, organic, if it's really certified organic, not just organic, because we wouldn't know actually it's in fact really organic. But if agricultural produce that is prepared, grown, and processed without using any chemicals is called organic. So it is very safe as opposed to regular. Because for the regular ones, fertilizers are applied, then mostly the biggest issue is not the fertilizer, in fact, but the biggest issue is other agrochemicals such as pesticides. So even pesticides are safe as long as you use the right dose, the right time. Pesticides are used in the entire world, so it's perfectly fine. But there's a guideline. Every manufacturer gives what we call a pre-harvest interval. Usually it is 14 days. Within the 14 days after applying, you shouldn't harvest and consume. Within 14 days, it follows the natural degradation pathway, so it reduces to non-detectable levels. But the thing is, in some countries, these agrochemicals are abused. That is the issue. As long as you follow the right recommended way, I mean, these are fine. But as opposed to the regular ones, yes, in the whole world, there's a high price tag for organic produce, and there's more demand. But unfortunately, it's a little expensive. In terms of nutrition, I wouldn't say a difference, organic versus non-organic, but safety, yes. Yes.
Right. Are there any certifications, organic certifications that we need to look out for? I mean, what can we look into?
Yeah, there are several organizations locally. They do carry out organic certification, especially when it comes to exports. They really look for this certification. Even for local communities available, there are few organizations, mostly private organizations, they operate in the country. They do certification. Yes.
Right.
So once certified, they put a crest on the pack that it is organically certified organic.
Right, sure. Now we can move on to the next question. And this again, I think, has been a big debate in the health community. So what is MSG and how bad is it for health?
Very good question. Now, everybody talks about MSG. I have seen in media, and also when we are talking to peers, friends, they are also very much scared of MSG. But I will tell you the scientific facts. The MSG refers to monosodium glutamate. So it is the salt of glutamic acid. What is glutamic acid? Glutamic acid is an amino acid. It's naturally found amino acid. So glutamic acid is found in many foods like soy products, then cheese, then yeast extract that you are familiar with that comes in amber color bottles. So many food items do contain glutamic acid and glutamates. So this is a sodium salt of glutamic acid. This was first found in Japan by a scientist in 1908. So it has been in existence for more than a century. Once it was found by this scientist, when he tasted, he got a different taste. So therefore, he gave the name umami, the flavor. There have been 4 flavors by that time known. Since this was quite different, he gave the Japanese term umami. Since then, it became very popular across the world. In many parts of the world, it is now recommended as a flavor enhancer, including in Sri Lanka. There are 3 flavor enhancers recommended. One is the major one is MSG. It comes under different trade names. So therefore, there has not been any scientific evidence to prove that MSG is bad for healthy adults. It does not cause any tumors. It does not lead to any cancer. It does not cause headaches, nothing. But there's a small percentage in the world, they really cannot tolerate even little amounts. It is like an allergic reaction, but by definition, it's not an allergy. It is not an allergy. Earlier, scientists thought that it is a hypersensitivity. Some people overreact to it, but now it is more or less scientifically and medically, it is categorized as an idiosyncratic condition. We cannot really explain what it is. So this is what was earlier known as Chinese restaurant syndrome. That is because of 1 or 2 cases. So these people, yes, they must stay away from MSG. But for the rest of the healthy adults I'm referring to, taking a little bit of MSG, you don't need to panic. There's nothing's. It is not going to cause any cancer, headache whatsoever. But the sensitive groups such as children, pregnant and lactating women, and immunocompromised, like special groups, better to stay away because we don't have much of evidence to show that it is safe for them. For healthy adult community, I mean, you don't need to be alarmed.
Right. I think that's a very interesting take on it, because I think initially before this, I was like, oh, MSG means bad. So I think this really like opened and widened my horizon. So thank you, Professor. So moving on to the next question. And this goes, I read an article on avoiding eggs because of its cholesterol content. Is it better to avoid eggs? Is this actually true?
A very timely question. Again, this is another myth,
right,
that we have that should be busted immediately. Yes, cholesterol is there in eggs. Especially it is not in the white part, but it is concentrated in the yellow part. White part is totally free of cholesterol. So the white part you can consume no problem at all. The yellow part contains nearly 200 milligrams of cholesterol. Okay. Now, cholesterol is generated inside the body, whether you like it or not, it happens. So I would say more than 75% of the cholesterol is endogenous. It is produced within the body without your knowledge. And dietary factors, the dietary cholesterol has no direct influence on the cholesterol level of the body. Said that, egg is perfectly okay. 1 egg a day for all people is perfectly fine. Even American Heart Association recommends 1 egg a day, even for heart patients. So now there are more evidence to show that There's no direct link between the amount of cholesterol you consume through food and the body cholesterol. Body cholesterol is sort of independent of what you take. So therefore, everything should be in moderation. So therefore, 1 egg a day is perfectly fine for almost anyone, unless the person is advised against by a qualified medical or medical professional or a nutrition or dietitian. For the rest of everybody, 1 egg a day is perfectly fine. You shouldn't limit on eggs. On the other hand, egg is extremely rich in protein, as I mentioned to you earlier, and also it contains a lot of vitamins and minerals. It's a cheap protein source in Sri Lanka. You shouldn't avoid that.
Right. And in terms of what are the factors that actually affect body cholesterol, is it totally independent, or like what are the factors that we need to look out for?
Right. That is to answer your first question, coconut oil. I told you that coconut oil is 90% saturated. This is the thing that we should control. Saturated fat increases the body capacity to generate cholesterol. In other words, saturated fats in general raises the body LDL level and total cholesterol level. So therefore, we should be more careful about saturated fats rather than being cautious about cholesterol itself.
Right.
Taking cholesterol up to a certain extent is fine because it does not lead to elevation of the plasma cholesterol level. But saturated fats, yes, there's a direct relationship.
Right.
There's a direct relationship. As to the contrary, the unsaturates, they wouldn't increase LDL cholesterol, we call bad cholesterol, or they wouldn't raise the total cholesterol. In fact, they work the other way. Monounsaturated fatty acids, what is you commonly found in products like olive oil and many other unsaturated oils, they are considered healthy as opposed to saturated oils.
Right. I think we definitely busted a myth. And now we will move on to our next question. And this again, I think people have questions about, and that is margarine better than butter? And what is the difference, pros and cons?
Right. Again, these two are two different things. Before 1970s, margarine was not popular. Basically, butter was the popular one. Everybody used butter. But butter is coming from milk. It's mainly from cow's milk. So in cow's milk, we separate out the cream part or fatty part, and it is churned to produce butter. Now, this butter is mainly saturated. Nearly 65 to 70% is saturated. So that was the time that this saturated concept came in. So therefore, medical professionals, nutritionists, they advise people against consumption of butter. Since butter is nearly saturated, highly saturated. So as an alternative, margarine came. Margarine is mainly coming from plant oils like canola oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, palm oil, etc. But in early days, when plant oils are used to produce margarine, margarine is a solid, oil is a liquid. So when oil is converted or transformed into a solid, the industrialist had to do a change. This change was done by the process known as hydrogenation. Unfortunately, this hydrogenation produced a lot of trans fat. Trans fat is the worst fat that you can think of because it alters the lipid profile in the worst possible way. So therefore, trans fat we don't need to have in our food. Therefore, the alternative was margarine, but margarine was even worse. So understanding this trans fat issue after year 2000, mostly after year 2003, 2005, the major industrialists, they changed this. They avoided hydrogenation, but they came up with another alternative. The scientific term we use is interesterification. Now, the leading companies, they don't use partial hydrogenation. Instead, they use interesterification. So interesterified margarine is perfectly fine. So these two are two different things. If I compare, margarine provides more polyunsaturated fatty acids. Polyunsaturated fatty acids are better for nutrition. It provides more monounsaturated fatty acids. They are again good for the nutrition. So butter contains more saturates, 65 to 75 saturated butter. But when it comes to margarine, monounsaturated fatty acid content is about 25%, and polyunsaturated fatty acid content is about 20% in margarine. Whereas in butter, saturates 65% approximately, and monounsaturated fatty acid content is approximately the same, 25. But unfortunately, the polyunsaturated fatty acid content is about 2%. So if you go with margarine, you will get a better nutritional profile, better high amount of PUFA and also high amount of MUFA. So that is a condition. Again, these are coming from two different sources. I wouldn't say one is bad and the other one is good. Knowing what it is, you have to decide what to take. But everything should be in moderation because both are fat. Both contain more than 80% fat. So that will come into that equation, 30% of the total calorie requirement. Yeah, so that is basically. There are a few other minor variations as well. Plant-based ones, margarines do contain phytosterols. Phytosterols are good to have in food. It's good to have. So these kind of other benefits are also there in margarine.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor. I think that gave us a very scientific understanding of this situation. And now we will move on to our next question. And that is, what is aflatoxin and how can we be sure that our food is free of that?
Right. It's again a multi-million-dollar question. And we had a serious issue over the last few months, January, February, March time, because the country detected aflatoxin in imported coconut oil. Well, it's not only in coconut oil, it could be in any coconut products, whether locally produced or coming from elsewhere. Especially what happens is there are fungal species, Aspergillus flavus, Aspergillus parasiticus. They are well known, and there's an addition, Aspergillus nomeus. These three fungal species, they easily grow on fatty foods. Remember, fatty foods. Now, coconut is a fatty food. During copra making, they easily grow on coconut, copra. Not only on coconut products, as you have correctly displayed here, corn is very vulnerable. Then peanuts are highly vulnerable for this. So these, once they grow on these fatty foods, they are going to be stable. The fungus will die off, but they will produce a toxin known as aflatoxin. It's not only aflatoxin, they produce many others, and also aflatoxin has different types like aflatoxin B1, B2, G1, G2, etc. Of these, B1 is the most damaging one. It is identified as one of the top hepatocarcinogens in the world. One of the very few most potent, most powerful liver carcinogen known to date in the world. Even tiny quantities, very minute quantities can be problematic. So therefore, we should be really, really careful. Unfortunately, copra oils that we consume in Sri Lanka might contain significant amounts. During coconut oil extraction, the toxin is extracted into oil. So it can be present in, as you said, in corn and corn products, peanuts, even in rice, especially when rice is wet and it is stored in bad way under high humid conditions, aspergillus can easily grow. So the regular culinary practices like cooking, frying, they are not really useful in bringing the level down. It can bring the level down, but only a certain portion can be destroyed, but vast majority remains. So therefore, all what we have to do is we have to keep fungus away from the food. Once toxin is produced, it's very, very stable. There are only two ways that we can destroy. One is by exposing to ultraviolet light, sunlight, ultraviolet light. But we don't recommend exposing our food to sunlight because it causes other damages. But technically, if you want to destroy aflatoxin, you can expose to sunlight for few hours, then it will effectively destroy. Then the other way is it is more applicable for oils. If oils are chemically refined, 99% of aflatoxin can be removed with the use of sodium hydroxide. But unfortunately, our coconut oil available in Sri Lanka is not chemically refined. Physical refining is of no help.
Right. And now we will move on to our last question for the day. And that is it really necessary to take supplementary multivitamins?
Right. What we recommend mostly is not to go for supplementary multivitamins unless there's a pressing need, but try to, these vitamins are freely available in our natural sources, especially in fruits and vegetables. And especially vitamin B complex, they are mostly in the outer surface layer, what you call bran, in grains. They are available in nuts, they are available in pulses. So especially rice, for example, the bran and germ contains a high amount. But if you consume polished rice, you will lose that good part. So you are basically losing goodies. So all what you have to do is plan your meal properly, then you are there, adequate amount of vitamins there. But there are certain conditions where you have to take the supplements. Sometimes if the absorption issues are there, if the person is really weak and if the person does not get adequate fruits, yes, on the recommendation of a nutritionist, a medical professional, yes. But otherwise, for regular adults, children, the regular food source is what we recommend rather than taking in the concentrated form. It might cause some other problems. Another exception is the those who can potentially become pregnant in that age, ladies. They should take additional amount of folic acid because a regular fruits, vegetables cannot provide that amount. So therefore, they are put on supplement, folic acid supplementation. But for others, what would we recommend is to get these from natural sources. Meat is another source. Eggs do contain. There are different water-soluble vitamins and lipid-soluble vitamins. Both are available in edible oils. We do get a lot of tocopherols. The fresh fruits, vegetables, they do contain vitamin C. The grains, the cereals, they do contain especially the outer layer, contain thiamine and other vitamin B complex vitamins. So why not go with natural? Yeah, that's basically my message.
Right, right. Thank you so much, Professor. And that brings us to the end of our interview on common myths and misconceptions about
You are most
nutrition
welcome. It's
and
my
food.
pleasure to discuss these things with you again. Once again, thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Professor. And we need to give a big thank you to you because I think I personally learned a lot from this session, especially because it's not very, vague, don't do this, don't do that. It has a very scientific approach. And thank you so much for bringing that out. And I think it'll definitely benefit the viewers. So thank you everybody for joining us on this session, and we will meet you in our next video. And until then, stay safe.